It's midweek already and time again to come your way with various business headlines by way of news. Today on your favorite business program, Business Live. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji-Wiafi. In today's edition, Ghana Revenue Authority assures of appropriate infrastructure to ensure Ghana gets the required revenue from the country's oil fields. Pioneer Ghanaian photographer James Bano appeals to government to institute policies to promote growth in the local photography industry. Plus more in the Joy Business Van today. These are the headlines, of course, plus other stories, all packaged in this 25-minute bulletin for your consumption. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji-Wiafi. You can always stay interactive with us by tweeting at Joy Business GH is our handle, and on Facebook we are on Joy Business. We're taking a short break. The details coming up.
GCB Bank.
You're welcome back. Now, the Ghana Revenue Authority says it has put in place the necessary infrastructure to ensure the state gets the required revenue from the country's oil fields. This comes in the wake of concerns the Kwame Nkrumah FPSO did not have the adequate infrastructure to account for every quantity of oil exported. But Commissioner General George Blankson says there is no cause for alarm. He says the FPSO John Atta Mills has addressed this major concern.
With the fiscal monitoring of exports, and which form the basis for calculation of tax, we have electronic seals on all the meters and also the valves through which we have the product flowing into the export vessels. And for that reason, we also have 24-hour presence on the vessel, on the FPSO here. And this, the young man who is here 24 hours, of course we keep changing him. After a few days, he will go, we bring in another person, but we ensure that we have 24-hour presence on this vessel to monitor production and exports, and therefore to secure the taxes that are due on the products.
How are you able to independently verify every liter of volume that goes out of this vessel?
As I have indicated, we have electronic seals on the valves through which the product flows. At various points, we have all these seals. So every drop of oil that goes into the valves, goes through the valves, will be registered. And even from the head office, on the screen, we can monitor 0.001 of a liter has gone into the export pipes that go into the export vessels. This is the kind of system we have. So we are constantly monitoring how much oil flows out for exports.
Quite interesting indeed. Meanwhile, the country's second major hydrocarbon development, Twineboa, Enyura and Intome, also known as 10 project, is said to have exported some significant volumes of crude since it began commercial production. The field, since August this year, has exported 1.65 million barrels of crude. But is the 10 field living up to expectation as a major alternative of crude oil production to tallow? George Wiafi tells us more.
Some analysts, looking at the volumes of crude that has been exported so far, the 10 field could indeed help improve the fortunes of tallow in terms of the daily production of crude exported from the country's oil fields and its profit. The field is said to hold about 2 billion barrels of crude reserves. It started commercial production in August with an initial daily production of 23,000 barrels of crude and is expected to increase to 50,000 barrels a day before the end of this year. Some industry watchers are of the view that the 10th field has come on time to help stabilize the amount of crude exported. Looking at the current challenges with the Jubilee field, which was even threatening oil production and the country's power generation. Tullow yesterday announced that it is reducing the amount of gas it exports to the Atuabo plant as it carries out some works on the equipment on the FPSO used in extracting crude from the seabed. This is part of a grand plan to finally correct the current problems with the turret bearing on the FPSO, which will result in some shutdowns this year and possibly early part of next year. Chief Executive of Tullow, Aiden Havey, tells Joy Business these works will help address all the problems with the Jubilee FPSO.
Well, Jubilee's, we've pretty well nailed down the problem in Jubilee, and we have a solution in place and we're working on that. So that's pretty well in hand now, and Jubilee's producing pretty well with the interim measures that we have in place, and we should have the first section of putting the FPSO on a fixed heading done by the end of this year. So it's pretty well on track. Yeah.
And what timelines are you giving to yourself in terms of completing work on the Jubilee?
Well, the main stabilizing of the FPSO will be done in the fourth quarter of this year, and then next year we'll fix that. We'll permanently moor it in a fixed position, and then the cam buoy, which we'll put in, is probably in 2018. But by probably around June of next year, Jubilee will be back to full production.
For Tullow, it has put in place measures to ensure that the current problems with the Jubilee FPSO, which affected volumes of crude exported, power generation in Ghana, and decline in revenue to the state, become a thing of the past when TEN hit full production, whilst correcting the current problems with the Jubilee FPSO.
Away from petroleum, one of Ghana's pioneer photographers, James Bano, has asked government to institute policies to stimulate growth in the local photography industry. He believes photography is vital in promoting Ghana's tourism industry and attracting foreign investors. Darrell Kwao has more.
87-year-old photographer who was recently honored by the state, showcasing some of his works. He was Ghana's first full-time newspaper photographer in the 1950s and is credited with introducing color processing to Ghana in the 70s. Speaking to Joy Business as he paid a visit to the offices of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, James Bano admitted a lot has changed about the photography industry here in Ghana.
I think with the emergence of digital photography, things have changed a bit. I don't know whether the professional photographer is losing work or not, but as I said, if you have your education and you have your background, you don't fear competition. You know what you're doing, you know what you can do, and you go ahead.
Elsewhere, professional photography is very lucrative business, not just for the photographers, but also economically beneficial to the countries too. Mr. Bano believes the country can also benefit if it increases investments in the industry.
Nice, attractive, artistic presentation of your product will attract anybody. And it shows even the people who are working on the plant, how smart they are, how dressed they are, how quickly they are. The attractiveness will attract somebody to say, oh yes, if I come to Ghana, I bring my business to Ghana, there are people who can manage it well. Using photography to attract business is more than just speaking words. You show it visually. And I think there are some plans that we can put into action to promote that side of photography.
Mr. Bano also urged Ghanaian photographers to remain committed to their work.
We have that chance to represent agencies taking photographs rather than sending photographers overseas to come and take pictures for us. And we can make plans, we can make assignments, our own assignments, and do projects which we can sell overseas. There is that market there waiting for Ghanaian photographers.
The internationally recognized photographer, James Banner, is hoping to devote the rest of his life to building the photography industry here in Ghana.
And they started having
Now, Rwanda has come up tops as best place for doing business. That's according to the World Bank, IMF, and the World Economic Forum report, which also ranks the East African country as one of the most reformed economies in Africa. The recent World Bank Doing Business report placed it as the second best place in Africa and 56th in the world to do business. Today, the country can boast of a viable national carrier with strong presence in Eastern Africa. So what is doing the trick for a country that came out of a ruthless civil war but is now described as a rising economic powerhouse of Africa? George Uafe caught up with Finance Minister of Rwanda, Claver Gatete, who shared his thoughts.
The biggest trick is leadership. The leadership that is dedicated, the leadership that's more focused, that understands the importance of governance, good governance, macroeconomic stability, and creating a good conducive environment for business. And of course, making sure that we create a system, an economy that is resistant, that is resilient to any kind of shocks, whether from internal or external world. So I would say the trick is leadership.
And any lessons for us, I mean, Ghana and even other countries in West Africa, what can we draw from you to also help us? Because we've not had our challenges doing business reports and all those things.
Leadership that is more focused, not only on planning, but also on implementation.
It's so live on Business Live. We're bringing you some stories across the country and beyond in business. We're taking a short break. We'll be back shortly.
Business Live today was brought to you by GCB Bank.
It's a Wednesday evening and, of course, time for the Joy Business Van.
The Joy Business Van is brought to you by Busy, making good things happen.
Starting a business in the building and construction industry is quite tough. Projects Bureau Limited has, however, defied the odds to make the mark in just about a year since its establishment. Let's now meet the entrepreneur behind this startup, Habakkuk Amachi Otabil. What's kept him going and the details on the Business Van.
Habakkuk Amachi Otabil is an entrepreneur with great determination. Today, he's trying to strike a deal for a construction project, one of several he's been able to secure within the 1 year he started Projects Bureau Limited. Amachi originally wanted to be an agripreneur, but would later find himself working for a building and construction firm after school. Then he started developing an interest in building and construction, but he knew it would be a tough industry to venture into.
I felt that I didn't have a choice but to start something. So yes, the fears were there, but I never looked at them.
What kind of fear?
At the beginning, I was worried about where to get customers because I didn't know, and people didn't know me to be, okay, I was in the industry, but I was starting fresh. So I had to convince people to give me a job to do, and not knowing where the next salary would come from.
Finding clients, capital to start, and of course an office space, those would be Amachi's initial headache.
At the time I had a car, small car, so I decided to operate from the car.
Tell me about that experience, operating from your car.
The car didn't have air conditioning. There was no AC. It was just me, my laptop, and my phone that I used as Wi-Fi. And then I bought the mobile fixed line that I also used to make calls. So when I call you, the number would come as a fixed line. So it made a lot of sense to people who received my call. And it was one of those very challenging moments where the doomsday was at its peak.
In a matter of time, he secured his first contract to work on a drainage project.
interestingly, it was my former employer who gave me my first job.
What was that?
It was a drainage work at one of their warehouses. So I went to my former boss one day, and I identified a challenge at the warehouse, and I told him that I could help them fix it. He said, okay, bring your bill. So I submitted the bill, and he said, but how are you going to do it? Where are your people? I said, okay, I'll team up with someone. So we teamed up, we got the job, and then we executed it very well. So since then, I think I've gone ahead to do about 3 or 4 jobs for them.
And that was the beginning of several recommendations for Amachi. He's secured several other projects since then, but that's not enough for him. He's got a great vision for Ghana's real estate industry too.
So what I want to champion, actually, with or without government, is the quality of buildings and the quality of structures that we put up, and to make sure that even if we end up developing our own estate, we develop in such a way that it meets not just Ghanaian standards but world standards, where anybody looking at it from any part of the world will appreciate the kind of quality that has gone into the. I think that is what is lacking in our industry.
And well, his earlier dream of becoming an agripreneur, well, that has not totally gone down the drain. He hopes to take it up sometime in the future. And that ends our show this week. My name is Darrell Kwal. The show is brought to you by Busy, Making Good Things Happen, and EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank.
All right, so you catch the repeat or the full story of Habakkuk Amachi Otabil on tomorrow's edition of the Marketplace. And of course, every Wednesday we have another version of the Joy Business Van for you. Time now for the busy bits.
Today's technology tips is just a quick reminder about how to spell check your documents in Microsoft Word. First, make sure the spell checking options are turned on in Word. Go to Tools and select Options. On the menu that appears, you can select the features you would like. For example, Word can check your spelling and grammar as you type and underline errors with a red line. Word can also suggest corrections to your spelling. You can also spell check an entire document by either pressing F7 on the keyboard or by going to the Tools menu and selecting Spelling and Grammar.
The Joy Business Van was brought to you by Busy, Making Good Things Happen.
Welcome back. And in interview of the day today, Ghana has mounted a rigorous campaign to boost the consumption of made in Ghana products with the introduction of a made in Ghana policy. The campaign also falls in line with the country's vision of becoming a higher middle income economy through the growth of local industries. However, for some industry players, the policy still leaves much to be desired. William Olmsted is the MD for Fairnot Ghana Limited at Osu here in Accra.
Interview of the day is brought to you by
EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank.
Have you heard of the Made in Ghana policy or Made in Ghana agenda?
I did. I was very excited when the president made his announcement, and I knew there was legislation, and I immediately had one of my people get a hold of the regulations that they were promulgating for the program, and all my hopes for the program just kind of crashed at that point, because it appeared to me that my first degree was political science, and we looked at bureaucracy, and this was one of those real examples to me of bureaucracy run wild. And they imposed a lot of regulations that had nothing to do with ensuring that products were made in Ghana, but at the same time took out so many Ghanaian products. Probably the primary example is, under the regulations as they existed 9 months ago, you had to have an ISO 9001 certification. I don't know if you've ever been through the process, but it's a very long, involved process. You have to bring in outside auditors several times. You have to have a stack of paperwork like this. We can probably do it eventually, partly because I've got the experience and I've done it. But most Ghanaian businesses of our size or smaller just don't have the resources, let alone kind of the understanding. And it has nothing to do with ensuring that things are good here. I mean, it's the kind of certification you would want to have if you were exporting. But it doesn't have anything to do with consumption within the business and building value-added industries.
Okay, but do you think that aside the policy, government is doing enough to support local industries?
I think it's pretty clear from what I've said that no, they're not. They don't have an effective Made in Ghana program. They don't have any kind of development investment funds that we could use to upgrade our equipment with low interest rate loans, which are very common throughout the rest of the developed world. There's a program, if I were to incorporate this as an American company, I could go to American government sources and get loans at 2.6% to develop this business here. But there's nothing like that for Ghanaian businesses. I think the government should be providing development funds to allow us to expand our industries and thereby expand tax rolls and jobs and everything else. I think government, that's probably the biggest problem, is we can't get access to finance. I mean, the Made in Ghana is an issue, the Voc Tech problem is an issue, but if we could get finance, we could get around most of those things. But there are very, very few businesses that can be profitable if they're having to finance themselves at 30% interest rates. You just can't do it.
Bouquet of business stories which came your way through the program Business Live. Join me again same time tomorrow for another interesting edition. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. You can always stay interactive with us on Facebook as Joy Business, and you can tweet at Joy Business GH. Good evening. Stay tuned.